November 22, 1963. In Dallas, President John F. Kennedy is fatally shot. But thousands of miles away in Paris, a different assassination hangs in the balance. While the world reels from tragedy, a CIA officer hands a mysterious pen to a Cuban codenamed Amlash. This pen hides a deadly secret, a nearly invisible hypodermic needle loaded with an untraceable poison. The plan? Amlash, close to Fidel Castro, will strike during a routine conversation. But in that Parisian room, something unexpected happens. Amlash inspects the pen and scoffs, doubting its sophistication. He leaves unconvinced. That day, Kennedy dies. Castro survives. Both fates sealed within hours, yet only one by American hands. The poisoned pen plot becomes just one line in a thickening file of failure. By then, it's the 8th documented CIA attempt to kill Castro. Every effort so far has ended in total defeat. The world's most powerful intelligence agency, armed with limitless funds and cutting-edge technology, can't seem to scratch its target. Castro, unfazed, continues his rule in Havana. Kennedy, meanwhile, is gone before Amlash even returns to Cuba. In a twist, history will never let go. Fidel Castro, public enemy number one for generations of American presidents, outlasts them all, dying peacefully of old age on November 25, 2016, at 90 years old. But why did every plan fail? This is not merely a tale of sabotage and secrets. It's a chronicle of almost comic desperation. Between 1960 and 1965 alone, at least 8 confirmed plots slither through CIA files. According to Cuban intelligence, the total number of assassination attempts balloons to an astonishing 638 over 4 decades. Poisons, gadgets, and wild schemes fill the record. Yet, despite all this effort and ingenuity, the results are the same. Castro lives. The story promises not just hidden gadgets and dramatic failures, but a deeper revelation. What happens when a nation devotes its largest, most secretive agency to removing a single man and still nothing works? The details verge on the surreal. Exploding seashells meant to lure Castro while he snorkeled. Cigars laced with toxins. A contaminated diving suit rigged to deliver a deadly fungus. Mafia connections, entire networks of informants, and unlikely allies recruited from every shadowy corner. There's the case of Marita Lorenz, Castro's lover, who hid poison pills inside her cold cream. Or the Chicago mobster Johnny Roselli, paid to orchestrate a hit. At every turn, the plots grow stranger and more desperate. But in Senate testimony, years later, a CIA officer shrugs. The agency was merely following orders, responsive to the desires of the government. Is that all there was? The origins of this campaign trace back to a single seismic moment. Castro's triumph in Cuba, January 1, 1959. The collapse of Batista's regime sent shockwaves through Washington. At first, the Eisenhower administration treads carefully. Castro, not yet declaring himself a communist, remains an enigma. But the picture clarifies quickly. Nationalizations of American companies, then overtures to the Soviet Union, and a handshake with Nikita Khrushchev. By mid-1960, the CIA decides Castro is a threat too close for comfort. A communist foothold just 90 miles from Florida. The gears of covert war begin to turn. In CIA documents, the language is deliberate and evasive. Castro's removal, his neutralization, his elimination. Official records avoid the word assassination. The reason is obvious. legal and political fallout. But the intent is unmistakable. Richard Bissell, the CIA's deputy director for plans, makes it plain. The agency seeks gangster-type action. The request for lethal action is authorized. The only question, how to get it done while keeping America's fingerprints off the gun? The answer? Outsourcing. The first approach, enlist the Mafia, the same criminals Castro had driven out of Cuba. Robert Mayhew, a fixer with deep CIA ties, contacts Las Vegas kingpin Johnny Roselli. Roselli connects him with Chicago boss Sam Giancana and Miami's Santo Trafficante, both nursing grudges after Castro's revolution shut down their lucrative casinos. The CIA offers $150,000, an astronomical sum for the era. The mobsters agree, enticed by money and revenge. The Technical Services Division prepares 6 poison pills, each designed to dissolve instantly and leave no trace. These are slipped to a well-placed Cuban contact, ready to drop a pill into Castro's food at his favorite restaurant. But Castro suddenly stops dining there. The plot collapses, unnoticed by its target. With the first plan a bust, the agency tries again. Another poison plot, another trusted contact. This time, nerves get the best of the would-be assassin. Doubt, fear, or perhaps simple self-preservation, whatever the reason, the plan is abandoned before Castro is ever in danger. But events on the world stage are moving faster. In April 1961, the Bay of Pigs invasion explodes into disaster. Amid the chaos, the CIA's assassination campaign is temporarily shelved. For a moment, even fanatic ambition yields to the shockwaves of defeat. But defeat breeds only more determination. By November 1961, the Kennedy administration launches Operation Mongoose, a sprawling covert offensive against Cuba. Sabotage, propaganda, economic disruption, and, always in the shadows, more plans to kill Castro. The mission is handed to William Harvey, a ruthless CIA operator with the president's brother, Robert Kennedy, overseeing every detail. At the opening meeting, Robert states the goal without hesitation: help Cuba overthrow communism, including, if necessary, eliminating Fidel Castro. The phrase hangs in the air, understood by all. A new phase of plotting begins. Still, no matter how many codes are cracked or schemes invented, Castro remains alive. The CIA's failures multiply, a cascade of wasted millions, ruined reputations, and operational farce. Exploding seashells and poisoned cigars become symbols not of ingenuity, but of desperation. But underneath the gadgets and gangster plots hides a bigger question. Why did the world's most powerful intelligence agency fail so spectacularly, so many times? As the Church Committee would later discover, the answer isn't a story of competence, but of confusion, of institutions blinded by their own ambitions. And so, the man they could never kill outlives them all. Imagine a world power so desperate to topple its enemy that it considers using madness itself as a weapon. The CIA contemplated contaminating Castro's television broadcast studio with a chemical designed to trigger LSD-like hallucinations. The hope? That, live on air, Fidel Castro would begin to babble and lose his grip on reality before millions of viewers. The plan hinged on humiliation rather than violence. But there was a problem. The chemical proved far too volatile and unreliable. The risk of failure, or a catastrophic mishap, outweighed the bizarre promise. The scheme was scrapped, filed away with other unfinished fantasies. But if this was deemed too unstable, what could possibly come next? The obsessive search for a weak point in Castro's armor continued. His signature beard became the next unlikely target. The agency theorized that if they dusted Castro's shoes with a thallium compound, the resulting hair loss would rob him of his revolutionary image. The plan was oddly specific. Agents would sprinkle the compound on his footwear during an overseas trip. But then, the unpredictable intervened. Castro abruptly canceled his travel plans. Another operation, built on layers of assumption and timing, disintegrated before it began. But even thwarted by a canceled trip, the CIA's inventiveness only escalated. What if the answer lay beneath the sea? Underwater sabotage became the new obsession. Knowing that Castro loved scuba diving, the CIA's technical division dreamed up a plan straight from a spy parody. Plant a large, dazzling seashell in his favorite diving spot, rigged to explode when handled. Their hope was that Castro's curiosity would trigger his own demise. Yet, once again, reality intervened. Experts deemed the plan unworkable. No shell could hide enough explosive, and the device's visibility risked exposure. The ocean remained Castro's sanctuary. But the agency's next attempt would move from the colorful and improbable to something that threatened not just a single dive, but Castro's very health. The next scheme was chillingly intimate. A custom diving suit was contaminated with fungal spores and paired with a breathing apparatus seeded with bacteria designed to induce a chronic lung infection. The idea was simple but sinister. An American lawyer, James Donovan, negotiating prisoner exchanges, would gift Castro the suit. Fate intervened in the form of human error. Before the contaminated suit could be handed over, an unaware official replaced it with a clean one. Castro's health was untouched. The strategy had come within inches of the target and still failed. Not by clever defense, but by accidental oversight. But what if the CIA could recruit an insider instead? Few plots reached the level of sophistication as the Amlash operation. The CIA recruited Rolando Cubela, a revolutionary insider, to betray Fidel Castro. This was a stark escalation. No gadget, no gimmick, just a trusted associate with access. Handled by senior CIA officer Desmond Fitzgerald, Cubela met his handler twice in Paris during October and November of 1963. Fitzgerald even posed as an envoy from Robert Kennedy, a fiction never sanctioned by the real Kennedy. The stakes had never been higher, but the timing would produce a twist in history that no one could have scripted. What happened on their second meeting would ripple across decades. On November 22, 1963, the CIA handed Amlash a pen, rigged with poison meant to be Castro's end. But Cubela, unimpressed, expected something more advanced. That very afternoon in Dallas, President John F. Kennedy was assassinated. The intersection was eerie. While one government agent plotted one assassination, their own leader was gunned down. For 60 years, rumors have swirled. Was there a connection? Official inquiries, from the Warren Commission onward, dismissed operational links. Still, the cruel irony lingers. The world's most powerful agency orchestrated a plot as its own leader fell. But the campaign wasn't just about strange tools or missed timing. Sometimes, the greatest drama was human. Enter Marita Lawrence, a teenager swept into the center of espionage. At just 19, she met Castro in 1959 and became his lover, only to be recruited later by the CIA for a plot cloaked in intimacy and betrayal. The plan was unadorned. Conceal poison capsules in a jar of cold cream, return to Havana, and poison Castro herself. She landed in Cuba, but Castro, perhaps tipped off, confronted her. He handed her his pistol, challenging her to shoot. Disarmed emotionally and physically, she never tried. When she reached for the capsules, she found they'd dissolved into the cream. The moment and the mission had evaporated. But what became of Lorenz and her story? Lorenz's account, repeated in public decades later, straddles the line between fact and fabulous myth. No independent evidence can confirm every detail. Yet CIA records show she was recruited and traveled to Cuba, but nothing more. Her story possesses a strange plausibility, both too bizarre for easy invention and too convenient to swallow outright. The truth blurs at the edges. Did love, fear, or fate interfere? Even the agency itself could only record that she tried and failed, her attempt dissolving as completely as the pills. But the failures weren't just personal. They were institutional. How would history judge the pattern emerging from these scattered, surreal plots? By the mid-1970s, the scope of these attempts could no longer remain a secret. The Church Committee, a Senate panel led by Frank Church between 1975 and 1976, began what would become the most thorough investigation ever undertaken into American intelligence activities. Their findings were staggering. 8 confirmed CIA plots to assassinate Castro occurred between 1960 and 1965 alone. The committee's report became the government's most candid admission that political assassination was not just fantasy, but documented policy. Yet as the committee uncovered plan after plan, a disturbing pattern emerged. But what, precisely, did their final report conclude about the agency's mindset? Their conclusion was as chilling as it was unambiguous. The CIA's campaign against Castro was defined not by precise calculation, but by institutional momentum and desperation. Plans multiplied, logic unraveled, and operational discipline gave way to a relentless search for any possible means, no matter how outlandish. Each failure led to a new, stranger attempt. Yet, with all its resources, the agency proved helpless against one man's survival instinct. And with this, the true lesson began to emerge. A lesson about the limits of even the most powerful institutions when faced with complex, unpredictable reality. But what does this mean for the very nature of power itself? The final assessment from the Church Committee revealed a startling pattern. The CIA's plots to kill Fidel Castro were marked by chaos, confusion, and a dangerous dependence on unreliable partners. The agency relied on the Mafia, hoping their desire to reclaim Havana's casinos would align with America's drive to eliminate Castro. But these interests only partially overlapped, forcing the CIA into awkward alliances where trust was impossible. Each side played its own game, and in the shadows between their goals, the operations consistently unraveled. But if the partnership itself was flawed, what happened inside the corridors of government made things even more precarious. One of the committee's most explosive discoveries was this: the President of the United States was frequently kept in the dark. Despite the gravity of these covert missions, specific assassination schemes were often executed without formal presidential authorization. The CIA officers behind the Castro operations worked from a vague sense of approval, a general government desire to see Castro gone, but nobody signed off on the details. This enabled deniability at the highest levels, creating a legal and moral gray zone. Who, then, was truly in charge? In this space, accountability evaporated, and the risks multiplied. But that was only part of the story. Why did every attempt fail? The committee cited poor planning, unreliable intermediaries, and Castro's unpredictable movements as core reasons. These are accurate, but they're not the whole answer. There's a deeper flaw, one hidden beneath the surface of bureaucratic missteps and operational blunders. What if the very idea of using covert action for this mission was doomed from the start? Castro wasn't just a man in hiding. He was a leader, constantly altering his routines, surrounded by security, in a country tightly controlled by his own forces. And every plot meant new eyes on the inside. But how deep did the Cuban government's awareness really go? Cuban intelligence chief Fabian Escalante made Castro's survival his life's work. The Cuban government's penetration of Miami's exile community was so thorough that many assassination plans were compromised before they began. Even the Mafia, America's chosen intermediary, sometimes reported back to Cuban intelligence, undermining plots at their source. As a result, Castro seemed always one step ahead. But there was another, even more overlooked variable: charisma. Castro's survival wasn't just about security. His presence, his story, and his movement outlasted every threat. Could killing the man ever have killed the idea? This is the paradox that haunted Washington. Even if a bullet or a bomb had reached its target, the revolutionary spirit Castro embodied would have survived, and perhaps grown even stronger. Time and again, the lesson was ignored. Removing a charismatic leader does not guarantee the collapse of his cause. The United States, intent on erasing Castro, underestimated the resilience of his narrative and the structure of the regime. The same mistake played out across the Cold War: belief in surgical solutions to political problems. But if the idea itself couldn't be killed, what became of the tools built in desperation? Fidel Castro outlasted every plot. 8 CIA operations are documented in detail, but historians estimate there were 638 in total. He survived 10 U.S. presidents, dying in 2016 at the age of 90, peacefully, in his own bed. His brother Raul had already taken the reins 8 years earlier. Each bizarre tool in the CIA's arsenal, exploding seashell, poison pen, deadly diving suit, became a relic, not a weapon. These objects tell their own story, a campaign that defied logic, history, and probability. But what does this long list of failures really say about the limits of covert power? The CIA, with virtually unlimited budgets and political support, wielded every advantage. Contacts in the Mafia, networks among Cuban exiles, tech wizards who could design lethal gadgets. But against one determined, aware man and a regime skilled in counterintelligence, none of it worked. The contaminated diving suit now sits behind glass. The poison pen Amlash refused is probably boxed in a government archive. The exploding seashell was never even built. The cold cream pills melted away in Havana. Marita Lorenz survived. Castro died of old age. Ultimate power met reality and lost. But what about the broader legacy? Thanks to the Church Committee's 1975 investigation, the CIA's Castro campaign became one of the Cold War's most thoroughly documented covert failures. The detailed record exposes not a shadow army of flawless operatives, but a tangle of misjudgments, uncertain authorities, and improvised plans. The infamous exploding seashell is more than a punchline. It's a warning. Under pressure, institutions generate ideas that showcase effort instead of wisdom, spectacle over substance. But why do governments keep falling into this trap? Look at the patterns. Khrushchev unleashed the Tsar Bomba, the largest nuclear device ever detonated, and got a radioactive blast over the Arctic, without solving the problem he set out to fix. The CIA devised gadgets fit for a spy novel, but ended up with a poisoned pen dismissed as crude. In both cases, the chasm between ambition and outcome was vast. Extreme measures produced extreme disappointment. So what is the lesson for the future? For every government, every institution determined to bend history to its will? The Cold War's most enduring lesson is this: power and capability are not the same thing. The urge to act, to demonstrate control, frequently outpaces judgment. In the end, the most powerful agencies on Earth could not dictate outcomes, only amplify chaos. Fidel Castro's story tree stands as a monument to the difference between effort and effectiveness. For more stories of power colliding with reality, subscribe to OKO, War Declassified. New episodes every week, revealing the plans, the myths, and the truths behind history's most secret operations. The next twist is already waiting.